Okay, yeah, let's do this, I guess. I'll be honest, guys, I'm not really sure what you want out of this one. I use the Street Sharks as a recurring joke on the show, mainly because they're obscure enough to be funny, but recognizable enough to be, well, recognized, and because everything about them so perfectly emblematic of the really bad, but still weirdly endearing mid-90s popular culture. But emblematic didn't necessarily translate to terribly interesting in this case. They weren't a huge generational touchstone like Masters of the Universe or Power Rangers, there isn't an especially interesting creation backstory like Ninja Turtles or Transformers, it wasn't a unique moment in a larger phenomenon like Sonic Sat-Am, and it wasn't ahead of its time like Gargoyles. Street Sharks was exactly what it looked like. Yet another attempt to make the TMNT lightning strike twice, perhaps noteworthy for being among the last such experiment, coming into being 2 years after Mighty Morphin Power Ranger had already arrived to supplant the Turtles' kid culture throne. But every time it comes up, people seem to get real excited about it. So, yeah, alright, let's do this. Ladies and gentlemen, the Street Sharks. Street Sharks was an animated TV show promoting a line of action figures from Mattel, though there seems to be some conflicting information as to whether the series or the toys were into production first. Either way, yeah, it's your basic Turtles wannabe. 4 half-human, half-animal good guys, all brothers, versus an expanding roster of similarly hybrid villains with the nominal gimmick of all being sea animals. To wit, our heroes are Ripster the Great White, Streaks the Tiger Shark, Jab the Hammerhead, and Big Slamoo the Whale Shark, while the roster of antagonists included Slobster, Slash, Killamari, and, I kid you not, Clamando, among others, typically under the leadership of one Dr. Paranoid. The story behind all of it was fleshed out in a 3-part TV miniseries that led into a 40-episode animated show. Our setting? Fission City, a transparent Romana clef of Los Angeles. In what might be the sole interesting note of the whole enterprise, it's presented as an early-stage dystopia being choked to death by smog and urban sprawl, but pollution fighting isn't really on the Street Sharks' eventual agenda most of the time. It's just kind of a weird LA-specific background joke, alongside a perpetually congested freeway system and narration frequently provided by a wisecracking traffic chopper. Things begin with your basic light V. Wiley dust-up between the obviously evil Dr. Paradigm and the generically good Dr. Bolton over Paradigm's attempts to conduct gene splicing, oh, forgive me, I forgot it was the 90s, gene slamming experiments to create human-animal hybrids.
No, you're not. I'm pulling the plug. The probability of that, 0. Stop, Paradigm! You can't mess with nature, I won't allow it!
To prevent Bolton from warning anyone about his mad scheme to create more useless versions of Bebop and Rocksteady, Paradigm uses the gene slamming to turn Bolton into some kind of freakish monster that we never fully see and who promptly escapes to provide narrative framework for later episodes. He then decides to pull the same trick on Bolton's 4 sons, ultimately transforming them into the Street Sharks.
Your hands! Check out your face! That lousy gene slamming Paradigm's gonna pay for this.
And really, the Sharks themselves are kind of the problem with their own franchise. They're actually interestingly designed as creatures go, especially since humans and sharks don't have a lot of interchangeable parts, and they lend themselves well to the show's emphasis on brawling and environmental destruction action scenes. I like that absolutely zero effort has been made to make them look anything other than fearsome, since, sharks, but personality-wise, they're all kind of the same guy, and that guy is a quintessentially boring mid-90s douche nozzle.
Shark attack! Let's kick some fin! Cool.
Look, I'd never argue that the Burnout, the Leader, the Jerk, and the Nerd were exactly paragons of character creation, but at least you could tell them apart. The Bolton brothers are just these empty vessels for generic teen machismo, various extreme hobbies and questionable 90s fashion choices, all of which were somehow supposed to be aspirational at the time. There's some cursory attempts to differentiate them by hobby or catchphrase, but ultimately it's a whole team of poochies, and that gets old really fast. In any case, the rest of the origin show is devoted to setting up the status quo for the rest of the series. Paradigm convinces the city that the Street Sharks are the bad guys, and he's the the hero trying to stop them, the sharks find allies in their dad and Paradigm's former colleagues, score some toyetic vehicles, an obligatory underground lair. Eventually, Paradigm gets gene-slammed himself and becomes Dr. Paranoid. As the series progressed, the brothers were mainly focused with finding their elusive father and reclaiming their human form, but they also managed to pick up fellow heroes like Rox and Moby Lick along the way. But the most interesting ally were the leads of a spin-off toy line originally called the Dino-Vengers. The name, I imagine, is self-explanatory. While they were introduced in a Street Sharks episode, they got a new backstory and a new name for their own series.
Extreme, extreme, extreme dinosaurs! The classic and Jurassic Park! Extreme dinosaurs!
And that really kinda says it all, doesn't it? Street Sharks had a respectable 2-season run before passing into syndication heaven, but it never quite became the turtle successor that its creators were aiming for. By the mid-90s, children's animation had begun to move away from merchandise-driven series. As previously stated, it was a certain live-action franchise that took up that banner, and toward a resurgence of comedy shows and the more heavily story-focused series like Paul Dini and Bruce Timm's burgeoning DC animated universe. Nevertheless, stuff like this does retain a certain goofy appeal, I will admit, and Street Sharks did get a DVD release for the nostalgic or the curious among you.
Sharks! Oh man! Awesome!
Yeah, aren't they? We're opening a new ride, the Street Sharks.
Wow, they look almost real!
Street sharks. Street sharks? I like it. I like it.
I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.